Now this morning, it was about a year ago that I heard Dr. Miller speak at an event, and I was like, man, we have to have Dr. Miller come to the Hills Church, and I had been looking forward to this day for quite some time. So don't let us stop. No, just but Dr. Miller is he's a historian. He is an award-winning author. He's brought some of his books with him. Soul Food was your first book. Won a James Beard Award for research. I think he'll probably tell us a bit more about that research. But the book was called Soul Food. Another book he wrote was called Black Smoke. He's written another book that sounds very intriguing about those who have served in the White House preparing the food. So I don't want to take everything. But, and he is the first lay leader of the Colorado Council of Churches. And so I'm just so grateful that we were able to make this work. And so, Dr. Miller, would you come and share with us?
Thank you, Pastor Matthew, for that introduction. Good morning. So good to be with you. So just to tell you a little bit about what's going to happen today. This is part sermon, part history lessons, and it's going to prayerfully leave you very hungry for that soul food meal afterwards. Yes. So just to tell you a little bit more about me, my faith journey is I am part of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. So my home church is Campbell Chapel AME at 22nd and Humboldt. I was basically born in that church, and I still go there to this day. And then to tell you a little bit about the Colorado Council of Churches, we're a coming together of 13 Christian denominations, and our mission is twofold. One is for us to get to know each other beyond denominational silos, and then to build on those relationships to do social justice work. But if you've never heard of the Colorado Council of Churches, we're the ones who put on the Easter sunrise service at Red Rocks every year. So I've been in charge of that for the last 11 years. So, we're going to have a blessed time today, and I'm going to end early to give you a chance to ask some questions. So please have those. All right, next slide. So I call myself the Soul Food Scholar. My tagline is dropping knowledge like hot biscuits. And I will endeavor to do that this morning. Next slide. You can find, thank you for laughing at these jokes. There's more coming, right? You can find me online at Soul Food Scholar on any platform, so please connect with me there. If you love what I do this morning, please give a brother some love. If you absolutely hate what I do, just hold on to that. There's really no reason to post. All right, next slide. So I actually was born in Denver, moved to Aurora when I was a little kid, went to Smoky Hill High School, then I went to Stanford University undergrad, then I went to Georgetown Law School, came back to practice law in Denver for about 4 years. Now this is not to disparage anybody who's an attorney, or you have attorneys in your family or your social network. Practicing law was not for me. It got to the point where I was singing spirituals in my office. And just to show you how challenging law firm life is, when I would start singing, white people would join in. You know how rough it is to go to the copier and say, hey, Kelly, what's going on? And she looks at me and says, nobody knows. Wow. All right, so I was going to start a soul food restaurant, but then a law school friend of mine called me out of the blue and presented an opportunity to work in the Clinton White House. Next slide. And what I worked on was something called the President's Initiative for One America, which was an outgrowth of President Clinton's initiative on race. And here is the outrageous idea that underpinned the initiative on race. If we just talked to one another and listened, we might realize that we have a lot more in common than what supposedly divides us. I know, it's outrageous, right? So that went on for 2.5 years, and then when that wrapped up, the people running that said, Mr. President, you need to have an ongoing office in the White House to deal with these issues, and that became the Initiative for One America. Next slide. So this is me in the Oval Office with President Clinton, just to prove to you that I was actually there. All right, next slide. So after I finished my White House stint, I wanted to come back to Colorado and start my political career because my ambition at that time was to eventually be one of your U.S. senators. So I was trying to get back here to start my political career, but the job market was really slow because the internet bubble had burst. And so I was in D.C. a lot longer than I expected, and I was watching a lot of daytime television. Now, I needed your prayers at that time because the shows that I was watching, they were just so horrible. I'm really embarrassed to even tell you what I was watching. Jerry. So in the depth of my depravity, I said, I should read something. So I went to a local bookstore and I found a book on the history of Southern food, and the author wrote this sentence that changed my life. The tribute to Black achievement in American cookery has yet to be written. I tracked down the author because I was reading the book about 14 years after it was published. And I said, hey, you wrote this one sentence. Do you still think this is true? And he said, yes, it's true. There's room for another voice, so why not yours? So that's what started my journey. Did get a political job, came back to Denver, but I developed this passion. So after work, I went to the Denver Public Library, after work and on weekends, and just gathered everything I could on African American food traditions. So this is the work that I did. I read 3,500 oral histories of formerly enslaved people, looking for every reference for food. I read 500 cookbooks, half of them authored by African Americans because I wanted to put Black food traditions in a larger culinary context. Read thousands of newspaper and magazine articles, talked to hundreds of people, and then because I care about my subject so much, I decided to eat my way through the country. So I went to 150 soul food restaurants in 35 cities and 15 states. Yes, my sister, I know you're surprised I'm still alive. I am too. And that was the journey. So I came out with my first book, Soul Food, and we're going to get more in depth in that. And as Pastor Matthew mentioned, I won the James Beard Award for Outstanding Scholarship and Reference. That's the highest honor you can get in food writing. And while I was writing the Soul Food book, I came across a few stories of African Americans who have cooked for our presidents, and that led to my second book, The President's Kitchen Cabinet. And what I discovered in that book is that every president of the United States, from George Washington to Joe Biden, has had an African American cooking for them in some capacity. So it tells that collective story. Now, that book did not win a James Beard Award, but I was nominated for several cool awards, including the NAACP Image Award for Best Literary Nonfiction. Now, even though I did not win, I got closer to a lifelong goal. I've always wanted to meet Halle Berry. And the year that my book was nominated, she was one of the presenters. So this is the progress that I made, y'all. We were in the same building at the same time. In fact, if you go back and look at footage from the ceremony, when she's presenting the award, she stumbles over her words, and that captured the exact moment when our eyes met. Even though I was sitting way up in the balcony. All right. And then my third book is Black Smoke, African Americans in the United States of Barbecue. It is a history of African American barbecue culture and shows our significant contributions to barbecue, because if you look at TV, read magazines, you would never know that Black people barbecue. It's usually just white dudes. And so this is really a celebration of that. That one also went on to win the James Beard Award for Outstanding Scholarship and Reference and the Colorado Book Award. So that's the work that I've done. All right, next slide. So, soul food. People ask me, where does this term soul food come from? Typically, people point to the 1960s when there were very strong expressions of Black identity, Black power movement, Black is beautiful. Next slide. But the actual earliest joining of the word soul and food in the English language comes from Shakespeare. In one of his earliest plays, The Two Gentlemen of Verona, there's a scene where two women, Julia and Lucetta, are talking about this handsome man named Proteus. And he walks by in one scene, and Julia says to Lucetta, "Oh, knowest thou not that his looks are my soul's food? Pity the dearth that I pined in by longing for that food so long a time." All right, so we have a couple of takeaways. One, even in the late 16th century, not unusual for two girlfriends to get together and describe a guy as yummy. That's the first thing. And the second is, Shakespeare is playing off the tangible and the intangible, and it starts to get to the heart of the soul food concept. But for the next slide, for the next 400 years in English, soul food meant doing anything to edify your spiritual life. So it wasn't connected to Black culture. So it meant going to church, listening to sermons, studying scripture, and singing hymns. So, fast forward. Let's talk about the religious life of enslaved people. So, West Africans did not arrive in the Americas as blank spiritual slates. They had their own spirituality and spiritual practices, but they were eventually introduced to Christianity. Now, here was the thing that was tricky. For slave owners, there was not a rush to make enslaved people Christians, because if they became Christians, that contradicted the rationale for slavery. It was that because these people aren't Christians, we have a right to enslave them, or we're able to enslave them. So there was a lot of mixed feelings about whether enslaved people should be enslaved. But eventually, Christianity is introduced to enslaved, and the version of Christianity they got was very, very myopic. Essentially, on Sundays, they would go to church, and they would essentially hear sermons that just took parts of the Bible that supported slavery. And that was the sermon that they got. Now, after that, though, they did have a chance to commune together, and it was one of the few times where they could get together without supervision and reinforce community, family, and social bonds. So a lot of what we call soul food took root in those after-church gatherings. All right, next slide. Another interesting thing about that time period is the advent of camp meetings. Has anybody here from the South ever been to a camp meeting? Okay, you know about these. So these were multi-day festivals, outdoors, preaching hours and hours on end. I know y'all get antsy when the church lasts more than an hour. Okay, imagine a whole day of preaching with breaks for food. Now this was very significant for enslaved people because this really starts to get to the heart of theology of soul food in the sense that enslaved people weren't given a strict interpretation of Christianity in these gatherings. There was more freedom of movement, and social barriers and social lines were more relaxed. So this is a chance for enslaved people to experience radical hospitality. That's what Christians are all about, right? That there is no respecter of persons when we come together. Everyone is welcome, and you are free to express yourself. So previously in the church services, enslaved people would often be told, you're not going to have any gratification in this life. You've got to wait till the afterlife. Camp meeting said maybe there's a different reality. So keep that in mind. All right, next slide. So if we're talking about any West African American culture, the cultural home and source that we point to is a band of countries on the western coast of West Africa. This is where most people of African American heritage are from, starting with Senegal in the north, going all the way to Angola in the south. Most enslaved people come from there. Now, for the soul food story, it's important to understand what West African food is like. Typically, it's some kind of savory soup, stew, or sauce served alongside or on top of some starch. All right? And in West Africa, they have different starch traditions. So in Senegal, going all the way down to Sierra Leone, there is an indigenous rice culture. So they had a lot of rice-based dishes. In the middle, it's more about pulses like black-eyed peas, millet, sorghum. And then as you get further south, like Ghana, Nigeria, it's more about root culture. So yams, cassava, plantains. Next slide. Here's an example of a West African meal from a Denver area restaurant. So for those of you who are familiar with West African food, on this side is fufu. So fufu, in this case, it was pounded yam. So you pound yam till it has the consistency of mashed potatoes. And then the idea is that you would break off some of that pounded yam. And on this side, we have tilapia fish steaks with a tomato, chilies, and spinach kind of sauce. And you break off some of that fufu, scoop that all up together, and eat it. Delicious stuff. Now, unfortunately, this restaurant closed. I think it had something to do with the name. On the marquee, the restaurant was called The Palace, Nigerian food and Philly cheesesteaks. Next slide. Next slide. All right. Here's a representation of forced migration of West Africans to the Americas. As I said, most West Africans come from this part of Africa. And so this journey across the Atlantic Ocean, which was called the Middle Passage, would last anywhere from 10 to 12 weeks. And then the enslaved were kept below deck the entire day, except for a few times where they were allowed to come up and eat, bathe, and exercise. So during the early years of the slave trade, the enslaved West Africans were fed basically rotten European food. The mortality rates got so high that actually slavers started changing and feeding the enslaved the foods that they were used to from their home country. So dishes like Pop and John, which is a black-eyed pea and rice dish, started showing up on the manifest of these ships as they were coming out. Because for the slavers, the only thing was, the calculus was, I got to have enough of my human cargo alive when I disembark in the Americas so I can make money. So here's the interesting thing. You can see this represents the 10 to 12 million West Africans that come across the Atlantic, but only a small percentage, 4%, come to eventually what we would call British North America, so the United States and Canada. So my argument in my book is that what we call soul food is essentially a European meal with West African influences, but when you eat with a person of West African heritage in the Caribbean and South America, because of similarity of climate and other things, it's more of an African meal with British influences. All right, next slide. So this is an example of a newspaper ad, and the reason I show you this is to show you that slavers were very cognizant of who they had below deck. This talks about the fact that on this ship, there were enslaved people from rice country. And for those who don't know, there were several several West Africans who were brought to the Americas because of their agricultural knowledge. And they built the sugarcane industry and the rice industry in this country, as well as tobacco, indigo, and cotton. All right, next slide. So, food was used as an instrument of power by slave owners. And so essentially, especially on the large plantations, enslaved people got controlled amounts of food once a week, called either rations or allowances. And this would be 5 pounds of some starch, usually cornmeal because it was most plentiful and cheap, but it could be rice or sweet potatoes, a couple of pounds of meat, pickled, dried, salted, or smoked pork, usually, but it could be beef or fish, again, whatever's cheapest, and then a jug of molasses. So enslaved people had to figure out how to survive by supplementing their diet by gardening, fishing, hunting, and foraging. All right, next slide. This is just an example of a plantation outside of Charleston. You've got the pasture area. Beyond that would be the area where the commodity crop was grown, but I just want to focus in on this part. These upside down numbers are where the enslaved people lived, so these were the slave dwellings, but below it says Negro gardens. So this shows you that enslaved people would often get plots of land to grow their own food. And then there was a poultry ground, so they were able to raise their own livestock as well. Usually chickens, but they raised pigs or other things. Some enslaved people got so prolific in their gardens that they were allowed to go to nearby towns and on Sundays sell food to anybody who wanted to purchase that. And some enslaved people made so much money that they actually were able to buy their own freedom and the freedom of other family members or to buy stuff for their slave cattle. So that's a story that's not well told. Next slide. So let's talk about what life was like in the rural South after emancipation. This shows you, this is a representation of the church was a very important social institution for African Americans. Arguably the first institution that African Americans had complete control over, and it was an important part of their life. So given the geographic isolation of the South, not only did the church feed your spiritual needs, but it also filled your social needs. So people would come from miles away for church, and it was an important time to just worship, get your spiritual food, but then also to build community. And again, food was often a very important part of that. Next slide. So after emancipation, millions of African Americans leave the South for other parts of the United States. And the church was very important in that because these migrants would often arrive in the city very poor, meager housing, and they were really food insecure. And so the church would step in to meet those needs for the food insecure. Next slide. So the black church became a dining option. So, for example, my church, Campbell Chapel AME, I was looking in old black newspapers in Colorado. So in the 1920s and 30s, my church actually operated a restaurant during the week so that people could come get food to eat. And this was, again, a way that churches would meet the needs of their community because they would often provide very nutritious and cheap meals. So this is an more recent example, but if you want to really find out who's favored in a black church, just pay attention to who gets the most action at the buffet line, okay? Because people know who made a certain dish, like, did Sister so-and-so make that? And then, they'll dive in. So, all right, next slide. And some church leaders, black church leaders, really took advantage of this. So one is this guy named Father Divine, who arrives in Long Island in 1919, and his real name is George Baker. He's kind of preaching and other things, and then he starts telling people that he's God incarnate. And people started believing him. I don't know why, but one of the reasons maybe is because he would have gargantuan feasts for just 25 cents. So we're talking about 25 courses for 25 cents. And he developed a following of millions with that approach. But he's one example. Now, when he died in the 1950s, there was a lot of explaining to do. But anyway, he had a big following. All right, next slide. Another example is Charles Daddy Grace. He started a denomination called the United House of Prayer for All People. There are still numerous churches in the South, and they are still known for having an incredible buffet that they offer through their church, and it's often a ministry. And so when I travel in the South, I do make a point of going to these church restaurants and just having this food by these church mothers who are just throwing down. All right, next slide. One example is Saints Paradise Cafe in D.C. This is connected to a United House of Prayer for All People church in Washington, D.C. All right, next slide. And then soul food played an important role in the civil rights movement. So a lot of the early organizing meetings for the civil rights movement were held at churches, but because local law enforcement was basically putting surveillance on these meetings, they started meeting at soul food restaurants because they could have a private room, they could have more effective and honest communication, and know that what they were doing made a tremendous difference. And these soul food restaurants would often provide food to these civil rights workers for free or for a very low cost. So 2 examples, Pasha's in Atlanta. This is the old location. It's now been moved and rehabbed. But Dookie Chase in New Orleans is another example of just great restaurants that supported and nourished the civil rights movement. All right, next slide. Okay, so now we're going to go through an anatomy of a soul food meal. Most of the pictures you're going to see are highlights from my national eating tour. So, next slide. So, one of those dishes would be fried chicken or smothered chicken. The kind of fried chicken I like is a nice crisp crust, moist meat underneath. You know, when I place my order, I actually hear something cooking. That's the kind of fried chicken that I like. This is from a place called Deborah's Kitchen in Philadelphia. You would also have smothered chicken. If you're not familiar with smothered chicken, it's almost the same approach as fried chicken. You lightly flour the chicken and fry it for a quick sear, and then you braise it in gravy until it's falling apart and just awesome. Fried fish, and it makes sense. A lot of African Americans descend from coastal people, so seafood is a big part of the African American food tradition. Catfish was dominant for a lot of years, but the catfish industry has fallen on hard times, so now you're seeing more tilapia, because tilapia is a lot cheaper. I don't know about you all, but when I go to the store, catfish can sometimes be $12 a pound compared to tilapia, which is usually $3, $4, or $5. And usually it's breaded in cornmeal and fried. Next slide. Then we have something called variety meats. Now these are the funky cuts of meat. These are the ham hocks, the turkey tips, the pork necks. These are smoked pork necks from a place called Bully's Soul Food in Jackson, Mississippi. It's my favorite soul food place in the whole country. These are pork necks and gravy and rice. Another thing is chitlins. Now, who knows about chitlins? All right. Oh wow, I'm impressed. For the uninitiated, chitlins are short for chitterlings. I know that my sister here is scowling, so you know all about it. These are pig intestines, okay? And I only have chitlins 2 times a year. You can have them either stewed or fried. I have them 2 times a year, Thanksgiving and New Year's Day. So this is my family's third Thanksgiving chitlin pot. All right, next slide. Then I have greens and black-eyed peas. Now, does anybody here know why I would have greens and black-eyed peas on the same slide? My Southerners? What's that? They go together. Why they go together? New Year's, yes. So the superstition tradition is you have greens on New Year's Day for folding money, and then you have black-eyed peas for coins or good luck. So you eat these things together. So in soul food culture, the popular greens are collard, kale, mustard, and turnip, and cabbage. So if you've been introduced to kale in the last 5 to 10 years, welcome to the party, because we've been eating it for about 300. And then black-eyed peas are native to West Africa. So that's an example of an African ingredient that comes and becomes part of soul food culture. Next slide. Candy jams, public service announcement. What we call yams in this country are not tropical yams. They are dark-fleshed sweet potatoes that were created by Louisiana farmers in the 1920s. Candy jams, you just get your yams, you can either bake them or boil them, and then you braise them in a gravy of butter, brown sugar, and spices, and it's incredible. Macaroni and cheese. Now, I wasn't going to include macaroni and cheese in my book because I thought it was too universal, but so many of my black friends threatened to slap me upside my head that I succumbed to peer pressure. So, mac and cheese is included there. All right, next slide. Soul food breads. We certainly have wheat breads, but I think cornbreads are the most emblematic. Now, when I make cornbread, I usually do a cornbread muffin, and my cornbread is slightly sweet. So this is one of the differences between soul and southern. When black folks make cornbread, we usually have some sugar in there. Now, there are a lot of white southerners that will say that means it's cake. All right, so they say you don't include sugar. So that's a divided line. All right, next slide. Hot sauce. So hot sauce is very popular in soul food. It started out on plantations as medicine. So there was a cholera epidemic that was ravaging the South in the 1850s. And so slave owners started adding chilies to the rations of enslaved people, and the incidence of disease went way down. Now, slave owners were not interested in paying a lot of money for health care, so this became the early health care. Now, there are different types of hot sauce. Tabasco is the world's most famous and best-selling hot sauce. I'm not a huge Tabasco fan. I like more of the red sauces like Crystal, Red Rooster, Louisiana Frank's. But here's another one called pepper vinegar, which is a renewable resource. So what you would do is you would get your container, put fresh chilies in there, and then cover it with vinegar and just let it set, let it steep for a while. And then when it got to the level of spiciness that you wanted, you would season your food. And then here's the renewable part. When it got low, you just added more vinegar and wait, and you've got your sauce. All right, next slide. Now, here's an important thing to understand. In soul food culture, red is a color and a flavor. Okay, so black people, we don't call things cherry or strawberry that have hints of cranberry. It's just red. And I personally believe that red Kool-Aid is the official soul food drink. Now, to understand, there is a generational shift happening. There's a lot of youngins that like purple and blue. And as I wrote in my book, I do believe the children are our future, that we should teach them well and let them lead the way, but not on Kool-Aid, because they're messing it up. So, red drink. You've had two ancestral red drinks from West Africa. You may not even know it. The first is cola. Cola nuts are red or white, native to West Africa. And you're probably saying, dude, what are you talking about? Colas are brown. Turn around that can or that bottle, you'll see there's caramel coloring. So we dye cola drinks brown in this country. But they come over as well as hibiscus. There's a type of hibiscus that's native to West Africa. And so in West Africa, these were hospitality drinks. So when you came over to somebody's house, they would either get the red cola nuts or the flower petals, the red flower petals of the hibiscus flower, and drop them in water, let it get a nice, rich red color, and then add sugar to taste, and then serve it. What does that sound like? That's the formula for Kool-Aid, right? Okay. So these drinks come across the Atlantic. So if you're familiar with Caribbean food, there's Jamaica, there's something called sorrel. And it was a Christmas time drink, but now it's consumed year-round. That drink makes its way around the Caribbean and South America. And then in South America, it's called Flor de Jamaica or Agua de Jamaica. So you go to a taqueria and you get Agua de Jamaica, you're drinking a riff off a West African drink. Now, I put sweet tea up here because a lot of people like to argue with me after my presentations. How come you didn't include this? I don't see a lot of sweet tea in soul food restaurants outside of the South. In the South, it's a wash with sweet tea. But outside of the South, you just don't see it that often. So that's why I don't think of it as soul food. I think of more of it as Southern food. All right, next slide. Now let's talk about the desserts. So dessert is really not a concept in West African cuisine prior to colonization. They just didn't have composed desserts. Maybe you would have some fruit after a meal, but this is all European stuff. So you can see that a lot of the soul food desserts are descended from European desserts. Sweet potato pie is a riff off carrot pie. If you look at carrot pie recipes from the 1500s, it's the same method in spicing. So you can see someone saying, oh, let me just swap in this other orange root crop for carrots. And so that's how that comes about. Peach cobbler shows up in the mid-1800s. The way they would make the old peach cobblers is they would have a giant cast iron vessel. They would put whole peaches in, pits included, and have a fire underneath. And then they would take leftover biscuit dough, roll it out, and spread it out on top. Put a cast iron lid on that, and then put hot coals on top of the lid. So that's how they cooked that top crust. So the earliest cobblers did not have a bottom crust. When oven and cooking technology improved, that's when you start to see the bottom crust added. Now, I think it's quite dangerous to have the pits included. I think that's a choking hazard, but that's how they made peach cobbler back then. Interestingly enough, though, when you get to the late 1800s, as they start to take pits out of the peach cobbler, that's when vanilla extract, almond extract, rose water starts to get added. So I think that was a cook's attempt to approximate the taste that were left by pits. Next slide. Banana pudding. Okay, I'm being very vulnerable because this is a banana pudding that I have made, and you can see my meringue game is not tight. I understand that. But banana pudding is a riff off a British dessert called a trifle, which essentially was bread with some kind of cream. So the bread here is vanilla wafer cookies. The cream is you make your own custard, or you can do Jell-O pudding mix. Not gonna be mad at you. And then add your own meringue. And then pound cake is another old British dessert. Literally, the old recipes were a pound of flour, pound of butter, pound of sugar. All right, next slide. All right, let's talk about soul food innovation. Next slide. One is chicken and waffles. This is an old, like a lot of people believe that chicken and waffles was born in Harlem in the 1920s. Too late, people come out of the jazz clubs at 2 in the morning, Too late for dinner, too early for breakfast. For this guy named Joseph Wells created a hybrid dish, bringing breakfast and dinner together, chicken and waffles. It's a great marketing tactic, but it's not true. Chicken and waffles comes from old Europe. So German immigrants brought a waffle and cream chicken tradition to the East Coast. We call them Pennsylvania Dutch, but it's Pennsylvania Deutsch. So it takes root in that Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, and then when it goes south, the cream chicken becomes fried chicken. Now this Poor Face makes a red velvet waffle, so you can tell that this is a twist on that. So unfortunately, Poor Face moved out to Aurora, and she just recently had a fire. So I don't know if she's going to open back up, but she's one of my favorite soul food places in Denver. Next slide. All right, I know it's early in the morning, but I'm about to show you something shocking. All right, next slide. I present to you the Kool-Aid pickle, known as the Kool-Aid. Has anybody here ever had a Kool-Aid pickle? Do you like them? Okay, do you like them? Okay, cool. Here's how you make a Kool-Aid pickle. Get a jar of already made kosher dill pickles, take the pickles out, make Kool-Aid with the pickle brine, drop the pickles back in. Are you okay? You're looking kind of, all right. Drop the pickles back in, close the jar, leave them there for 2 weeks, take them out and eat them. If you like the taste of pickles and of Kool-Aid, this is just a sweet and sour combination. If you don't like either one of those things, this is one of the nastiest things you'll ever put in your mouth. So the question is, where does this come from? Next slide. So when I interviewed elders, they said they did this. When they were kids, they would go to the corner store, get those huge pickles, cut the tip off, put hard candy into the soft part of the pickle, let the pickle juice dissolve it, and then suck on it and eat it. So it just shows you kids messing around. So I believe the Kool-Aid pickle is just another step from that. All right, next slide. Also, Nashville hot chicken, very, very popular. This started in a black restaurant in Nashville. I don't care what anybody else tells you. It started at a black restaurant in Nashville called Princess. And this is how it started. It was started out of jealousy or as being a sperm lover. So there was a known womanizer named Theaster Prince. And true to form, he cheated on his girlfriend, who was a very good cook. So she decided to get revenge by making his favorite thing, fried chicken, but making a super spicy version of it to burn his mouth out. So she does this, dude takes one bite and loves it. So they open up a restaurant, and that's how Nashville hot chicken starts. All right, next one. And then I have to say, Los Angeles had the prize for the weirdest soul food that I ate in my national soul food tour. So I went to this place, Tony's Soul Burgers, and I had a soul food Thanksgiving burger. Here's what it is. Bun, whole wheat bun, all turkey patty, cheese, turkey bacon, a layer of cranberry relish, a layer of cornbread, stuffing, cornbread dressing as we would say, then a layer of collard greens, then a fried egg, whole wheat bun. Slamming. All right, next one. Then I had a soul food hot dog. Here's a soul food hot dog. Bun, wiener, collard green and cucumber relish, crumbled bacon bits, and a sweet potato puree drizzle. Amazing. All right, next slide. One thing I liked about the sold out place is if you've ever watched Good Times, at the end of the show they have the mural where the credits are rolling. They made a replica of the mural, but everybody has a hot dog instead of a pulled cue steak. I just thought that was cool. All right, next slide. So let's talk about soul food's denominations. Just have a little fun. So in addition to traditional soul food, next slide, some things you have are healthy soul food, so down-home healthy. So the idea is to take out the salt, the butter, the fat, and make certain dishes. So this is one of the most popular dishes in my book. I have recipes in my book. This is a Creole broiled catfish with sweet potatoes. So what you would do, instead of frying that catfish fillet, you just rub it in olive oil, put on your seasoning, and then broil it for about 7 minutes till it's opaque. People go crazy for that. I'm telling you, they love it. All right, let me pause and give you some life advice, because the Hill Church, we care about your love, you care about your soul as well as your love life. So this recipe is from an ex-girlfriend. So here's the advice. If you're in a relationship with somebody who's a good cook, do what you can to stay with that person. But if you notice that things are getting rocky, I can tell you from personal experience, it's a lot easier to get recipes before you break up. All right, next slide. Then we have upscale soul food. So this is doubling down on the fat, like you're going to use, duck fat. You're going to use exotic ingredients, high quality meats, heritage breed meat, heirloom vegetables, and an emphasis on presentation so you can charge a lot of money. Next slide. But I got to tell you, the creative energy right now is in the vegan space. So yes, this is the most popular trend in soul food right now. And it's actually, so you may think, well, that's an oxymoron. How can you have vegan soul food? If you actually go back to what enslaved people were eating, it's very close to what we have called vegan today. It was seasonal vegetables. They didn't have much access to meat, and they didn't have access to refined ingredients like white sugar and flour because those were considered prestigious, okay? And so it's very close to what we call vegan today. So I went to this place called Solely Vegan, moving from left to right. Southern fried tofu, shaped to look like fried chicken, expertly fried, very good. Vegan mac and cheese. So now vegan has no dairy, right? So what they did is they used almond milk, and the inside had the consistency of ricotta. If you've ever had like ricotta cheese, it was kind of like that, like a tortellini. It was very similar to that. Sir, are you okay? You look like you're very disapproving of this mac and cheese. All right. And then the vegan collard greens were as good as any I've ever had. Because if you're a cook, you know that you don't need meat to flavor stuff, right? If you know how to season, you can have really, really good food. And then there was a cayenne pepper lemonade. All right, next slide. Then we have what I call edible ecumenism. This is fusion. So one thing is you're seeing Afro-Latino fusion. So this is a place in Atlanta. Don't get mad at me because this is what he calls himself. He calls himself the Blaxican. And he's doing collard green quesadillas, which is really, really tasty. And then soul food-filled egg rolls. So they call them soul rolls. So imagine this is a chicken, rice, and gravy one from Cora Face. But you could have an egg roll filled with mac and cheese, or sometimes people put a whole soul food meal in that egg roll. It's very, very popular. Next. And then playfully talk about the prospects of soul food in heaven. In this case, Mars. So I don't know if you know this, but there is an ongoing experiment on a hillside of a volcano in Hawaii, and it's called the High Seas Experiment. So essentially, people are living in this module, and they have to, when they leave, they have to wear space helmets and other things because they're trying to model what a peopled expedition to Mars might be like. And the reason why they're on this volcano is because the soil on this volcano is very similar to the soil on Mars. So they're figuring out what they can grow and all of these other things. Any journey to Mars is going to take at least a year. So there's no way that they can put all the food that they want to eat on that ship because it would be too heavy to escape Earth's gravitational pull. So they're going to have to figure out what they can grow along the way. And they're looking at a lot of soul food items. They're looking at greens, right? If you can figure out how to grow a plant and just get those leaves and keep them growing, that's renewable food. They're looking at hibiscus and sweet potatoes and other things. One thing they're not looking at is cornbread. Does anybody know why they wouldn't think about cornbread on a spaceship? No, not the altitude. No, not the temperature. No, it's because of the zero gravity environment. Because what does cornbread do? It crumbles, right? So if you're on a spaceship and you have cornbread, your spaceship's going to be straight nasty the whole trip. So that's why they're not doing that. The other thing is they're not looking at chitlins because you can't roll down the window in space. Yeah. Hold on to your question. You have a question? Oh, no, I thought you were raising your hand. No? Okay. All right, next slide. And so just to wrap this up, one thing that you're seeing that's really exciting right now is you're seeing more black churches who are the mainstays of providing soul food and dealing with food insecurity, thinking about new ways to do that in the 21st century. So we have more churches now that are using some of their land to create gardens to feed the people who are hungry in their communities. We have more, churches have long been places where we've had food pantries and other things, but there's a lot of inventive and creativity going into that. So it's really exciting stuff. And then the last thing I will ask you to do as we think about this theology of soul food is figure out in your life how you can set a welcome table for others. We're in a very fractured society, and we Christians, right, we have the power and the love to be the repairers of the breach. So I ask you to think about the wedding feast parable and extend the invitation to others, especially people whom you normally don't talk to, maybe don't agree with. Bring them into that space, and then hold the tension if you disagree, right? Look at that person as a child of God, and stay hungry for dialogue. We really need the coming together, and we all have the power to do that. Next slide. All right, thank you so much. I'm going to leave this up while I answer questions. Thank you so much. Any questions? Nope. Oh, yes. Was that, I heard you say cornbread, I didn't. I love both of those. So my favorite soul food thing is to have greens. So when I have greens, I usually do a mix of mustard and turnip greens with smoked turkey. That is my absolute favorite soul food thing to eat. If I can round out the plate, then I would add some black eyed peas and maybe some fried whole bone-in fish, because I love bone-in fish. I'm fried. I'm a big seafood fan, so that's my favorite thing. Yes, sir.
Have you got this information to Black American West Museum? I'm sure they'd be interested.
Yeah, so I've been talking to Black American West Museum about a number of things. One thing I did mention is I actually created a Black History exhibit at the Museum of Boulder that has actually won some awards. It's going to run until August of 2025. So I've worked with them to get content for that, but there are other things that I want to do with them, because that is just a blessed resource in our community.
It's about 10 minutes away from
Yep. Okay, you have a question? Okay, he says I should start my own restaurant. Okay, first of all, do you know how much work that is? Man, a restaurant is a lot. Actually, I did want to have a restaurant. If you're familiar with Denver, the Five Points area, there's something called the Rossonian Hotel. I actually wanted to have a restaurant there. And this is the concept. It would be traditional soul food, then kind of health-conscious soul food, and then there would be a rotating menu every 6 months where I would just go around the African diaspora. So for 6 months, I would talk about Gullah, Geechee food from South Carolina, and then maybe another 6 months I'd go to Senegal and feature dishes from that. If I had enough resources, I'd actually bring a chef from that area to curate the menu. I had that dream, but it didn't work out. I may come back to it later, but man, that's a lot of work. But I feel you on that. Thanks for that. Any questions over here? Yes?
Where did the term Sweet Lucy come from?
Sweet Lucy? I don't know where the term Sweet Lucy came from. Now, in what context? In a food context?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't heard that one before. Yeah, can you tell me what part of the country?
Louisiana.
Louisiana, Sweet Lucy.
And it's Kool-Aid. It's Kool-Aid, but they call it Sweet Lucy.
Oh, I love this. Okay, thank you for dropping knowledge on me. All right. I'm going to have to ask about that. See, I love to have just random internet questions, and so you just gave me one. I'm going to put that on social media.
All right.
But that's what y'all call a Kool-Aid in Louisiana.
Sweet Lucy.
In New Orleans?
Yes.
Okay. All right, cool. Any questions over here? I don't want to... Yes? I'm sorry, the baby was crying. My favorite place where? Oh, in Memphis? So, I love Cozy Corner for barbecue. I love the barbecue shop as well. Those are probably my two favorite places. And what I love to get at Cozy Corner are two things. There's something called barbecue... she does barbecue Cornish hens. And then she also does barbecue bologna. Now, if you've ever heard of barbecue bologna, this is not the bologna of your childhood where you came home, you had those little slices, you put it in the frying pan, you watch it pop up, you cut it, put some cheese on it. No, this is like tube bologna that they stab multiple times, put it on the smoker for several hours. Then when you order your sandwich, they would cut off a 1/4-inch slice and put it on the grill to get some texture. And then it's white bread, bologna, coleslaw, sauce, white bread. Heavenly. So I love that in the Cornish hens at Cozy Corner. And then in terms of the barbecue shop, they invented something called barbecue spaghetti. Have you heard of this? Yeah. So for those who don't know, this is barbecue spaghetti. You have the noodles, the pasta, and then instead of marinara, you have barbecue sauce. And no, sister, I'm telling you, it's good. And then you add the grilled meat, mix it all together, and add some spices. It's amazing. Would you vouch for me? Can I get an amen? Okay, all right. Okay, they're your favorite? Okay, cool. Yeah, in terms of soul food, you've got the 4-Way Grill, which is one of the oldest soul food restaurants in the country. Been around since the 50s. And there was another place called Melanie's, but I think they closed. So, thanks for asking that. Yeah. All right, one more question. Oh, yes?
Do you address a possible correlation between how African Americans prepare soul food and health issues?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked that. So the question was, is there a correlation between how African Americans prepare soul food and health issues? And so I have been a big advocate that we need to have a more comprehensive look at soul food, because typically what people are making in the soul food tradition is the celebration food. So things like fried chicken, the desserts and all, that was something that people ate every once in a while. Now the revolution in our agricultural system and our food system is that now these celebration foods are available whenever you want. And so what I'm trying to tell people to understand is like, yeah, if you eat celebration food of any culture, you're going to have bad health consequences. So think about all the other aspects of soul food, because if you listen to what nutritionists are telling us to eat, more dark leafy greens, more sweet potato, more fish, those are the cornerstones of seafood or of soul food. So I'm asking people to have a more balanced look. And then I think we should look at environmental factors. You don't think that being exposed to racism 24/7 doesn't have an effect on your health? I think it does. So it really pains me when I see all these things like, soul food is killing black people and all that kind of stuff. Because I just think day in and day out, I don't know if a lot of African Americans are actually eating soul food. I think they're loading up on all this other stuff. Convenience food, junk food, and all this other stuff. And I think that's leading to the health consequences. Yep. Church's chicken. That's your favorite? No. Oh, okay. Yeah. There was one. Can we have time for one more? Or, there was one more question back here. Okay, cool. All right, cool. Thank you so much.